You'll be back in 2 weeks, crying, broke, and begging me to take you back. You won't last a day without me. That's what he said. That's what Jake said, standing there in our living room, barefoot, smug as ever, holding his third craft beer of the night like it was a mic he'd just dropped. And you know what? I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even roll my eyes. I just smiled. Then I zipped my suitcase, picked up my keys, and walked out. That was the last time I saw him, or it was supposed to be. Funny thing about people like Jake. They don't really believe you can leave. Not really. Especially not women like me, quiet, kind, never causing a scene. He thought I'd buckle. He thought I needed him. But Jake didn't realize I'd been surviving despite him, not because of him. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back when I thought what we had was love. I met Jake 4 years ago at a work mixer. I was in the marketing department of a mid-sized logistics firm downtown, and he was a consultant our VP brought in to streamline internal systems. That basically meant he talked a lot in meetings and made prettier PowerPoints than anyone else. He was charming, I'll give him that. Smart. Confident. That quiet kind of handsome that doesn't scream for attention but definitely knows he's being watched. We started talking over drinks, and by the time the night ended, he was walking me to my car, grinning like he already knew this would be more than just a one-time flirt. I was 31. Ambitious, maybe a little too cautious in love. I'd just gotten over a breakup with a guy who ghosted me after 2 years. Jake felt like a reset button. He made big promises early: travel, business ventures, maybe even a joint podcast. We're a power couple, he used to say. For a while, I believed him. He moved in after 6 months. Said it was efficient and modern of us, and I didn't push back. My apartment was nicer, closer to downtown, and I was already covering most of the rent. He didn't say thank you when he left his toothbrush in my bathroom, but he did tell me, "This place feels like home now." Back then, that was enough. It took me a while to notice the little things. How every time I got a raise, he'd suddenly start talking about taking a break from consulting. How my credit card would quietly pick up more of our shared bills. How he'd scoff when I mentioned wanting to apply for the global marketing role, the one that would require relocating for a year. He laughed the first time I brought it up. Laughed. Overseas? You think you can handle that? He asked, smirking. I laughed too. Back then, I thought he was just teasing. But when I brought it up again, seriously this time, with a detailed plan and research on relocation packages, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You wouldn't survive out there, Emily. You don't know how good you have it here." I remember blinking. Just blinking. Like maybe I'd misheard. But he doubled down. "You're not cut out for solo life. You'd burn out in a week without me managing things. Honestly, it's kind of cute you even think you could do this." That was the first moment I really felt it, the gut-deep twist of humiliation. Not just disappointment. Not just frustration. But shame. He didn't believe in me. Not a little. Not at all. Still, I stayed. I made excuses. Told myself he was just scared of change, or maybe afraid to lose me. But I know better now. I stayed because I didn't want to admit how far I'd already compromised myself just to keep him happy. I let him shrink me. And he did it so slowly, I barely noticed. There were other signs too. Like the time I landed a major project at work, we were pitching a regional brand to a Fortune 500 client, and I'd been burning the candle at both ends for weeks. The night before the final presentation, I came home exhausted, nervous, barely holding it together. And Jake? He was sitting on the couch, playing Xbox, annoyed that I wasn't in the mood to order takeout and watch a movie. "You're always stressed lately," he said, not looking away from the screen. "You should think about pulling back a bit. You're not built for high pressure." I remember that sentence because it sank straight into my chest like a stone. You're not built for high pressure. But the worst moment, the one that still stings, came a few months before I left. I'd been invited to a leadership summit in DC, an invite-only event with some of the biggest names in our industry. I was thrilled. Nervous, sure, but honored. I remember running home after work, practically glowing, and telling Jake about it as I changed out of my heels. He didn't even look up from his phone. Just nodded and said, "You're not seriously going to go, are you?" I froze. Why wouldn't I? He shrugged. You don't do well at things like that. All those big personalities. You'll just end up being someone's assistant by the second day. I wish I was making that up. And when I confronted him later, when I finally had enough and told him that maybe, I needed to start thinking about what I wanted, he didn't apologize. Instead, he leaned back on our couch, hands behind his head, and said, "Emily, you've got this whole fantasy of being some independent girl boss or whatever, but let's be real. You'd be a mess without me." That was the moment. Not a single tear. Not a scream. Just clarity. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "Okay." And then I started packing. I didn't tell him about the promotion offer that had come through again. I didn't tell him I'd been quietly building a savings account in my name only. I didn't even tell him I had already accepted the overseas role and was scheduled to leave in 2 weeks. He thought I was bluffing when I packed my suitcase. He thought I was throwing a tantrum. He said, "Go ahead. Have fun crashing and burning. I'll be here when you realize you're nothing without me." And with that, he went back to his Xbox. I flew out the next morning. My new office was in Copenhagen. Cool, clean, efficient, nothing like the chaotic pressure cooker of our American branch. The team was diverse, sharp, and genuinely supportive. I found myself staying late not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I was learning. Growing. Being challenged. Within 2 months, I was speaking on panels. Within 4, I was managing a cross-continental project. And within 6, I realized something shocking. I was happier than I'd ever been. No one asked me to play small. No one laughed when I pitched big ideas. And no one, absolutely no one, made me feel like I needed their permission to succeed. Jake didn't call. Not once. No apology. No "I miss you." I figured that was the end of it. Until one night, about 11 months in, I got a message from a mutual friend back home. It was a screenshot. Jake's social profile, newly scrubbed, suddenly filled with captions like "Some journeys aren't meant to be taken alone" and "Growth comes when we least expect it." Followed by a picture of my old apartment, the one I'd let him stay in while I was abroad, with a big "For Rent" sign in front of it. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. But I knew. He was coming back. Probably with some speech rehearsed in the mirror, ready to play the victim. He didn't know I'd already canceled the lease in my name. That I'd had the locks changed. That I'd had someone else move in. So when he showed up at that apartment door, bouquet in hand, ready with some Hollywood apology, a stranger answered. "And Jake?" He finally learned what it felt like to be irrelevant. I didn't attend the anniversary dinner. But I watched them clink glasses without me. I watched it all unfold from 4,300 miles away. Jake's birthday party, hosted by some mutual friend I hadn't heard from in months, filled my phone screen through a string of tagged Instagram stories. There he was, grinning, arms around new faces, making jokes like he hadn't just told the woman who loved him that she'd crumble without him. I wasn't tagged, of course. I wasn't even mentioned. It was like I'd been erased. And I let it happen. Or at least, it looked that way. That's the thing about disappearing. People think it means you gave up. They think silence means surrender. But sometimes, silence is strategy. I didn't post when I moved. I didn't announce the promotion. I even deactivated my old Instagram account, not out of shame, but to make space. To breathe without him watching. No more check-ins at cafes he might drive past. No more liking his friends' photos just to seem polite. I became invisible. And it was the most freeing thing I'd done in years. He probably thought I was licking my wounds in some sad sublet, surviving on microwave meals and crying into a bottle of cheap wine. That's the story he would have told people. Emily ran off to prove something and burned out. Classic. But in reality? I was waking up to city views from my loft apartment in Copenhagen. I was sipping coffee from a quiet little cafe across from my new office where everyone, and I mean everyone, respected me. Where I was the expert in the room, not the girlfriend of the guy who thought he was. Where I'd been promoted again, this time to Senior Director of International Strategy. Still, I said nothing. I didn't correct the rumors. Didn't reply when one of Jake's buddies messaged me out of nowhere with a, "Hey, just checking in, you okay over there?" Followed, of course, by a "Jake's been having a hard time too, you know." Hard time. Please. He moved on fast. Or tried to. According to the few mutuals I hadn't muted, Jake started dating a woman named Brielle. Of course it was Brielle. She was everything I wasn't, loud on social media, obsessed with appearances, loved to post mirror selfies of the two of them holding overpriced cocktails. The captions were the worst. Found someone who actually believes in me, red heart. She doesn't try to change me. Just lets me be me. And my personal favorite. Surround yourself with people who lift you up. It was laughable. He made it sound like I'd been some kind of tyrant. Like I hadn't literally paid our rent for 2 years and cheered for every half-baked startup idea he floated and failed to follow through on. I lifted him so far up I nearly broke my own back doing it. But sure, Jake. I was the problem. I let him think that. He'd made his choice. So I made mine. That year, I didn't come back for Christmas. Or the spring wedding of a mutual friend. Or the office reunion in Chicago. I stopped replying to texts that opened with "Hey stranger." I removed my name from our old Netflix account. Changed my number. Quietly sold the car he'd always insisted was technically ours, even though it was registered in my name and paid for entirely by my bonus the year he got laid off. I was done with breadcrumbs. Done with making it easier for him to find me. The quiet shocked people, I think. One of our old coworkers messaged me on LinkedIn. "Didn't expect you to actually leave the country. Jake said you'd be back in no time." I didn't reply. I just archived the message and kept working. And yet. I was watching. Quietly. Not obsessively, just enough to see where the pieces landed. Jake posted a lot. Always has. Bragged about projects that didn't exist. Tagged himself at business conferences he wasn't actually invited to. You can learn a lot by noticing what people don't say. Like how he never mentioned getting a new job. Or how Brielle started posting less and less. How his apartment, the one he claimed was temporary, looked suspiciously like the same old place we used to share, just redecorated to look like he hadn't been left behind. And then, one night, the story stopped. Completely. No birthday posts. No photos with friends. No pictures of Brielle's perfectly filtered nails wrapped around overpriced lattes. I waited. 2 days. A week. Nothing. And then, a photo. It was Jake. Alone. Standing outside my old apartment in Chicago, holding a bouquet of white roses and looking up at the door like he was waiting for something, or someone. Someone who wasn't coming. Except someone did come. The new tenant. A man named Graham, mid-30s, kind, lived there with his boyfriend and their dog, Beans. I know this because I rented the unit to them myself when my lease ended. I'd asked my former landlord to let me take over the sublease after I left, just in case. Just in case Jake ever tried to spin the story. Just in case he came back. Jake had rehearsed something, you could tell. He was probably standing there, reciting some half-sincere apology. he might have even believed it. Maybe he realized too late that I hadn't crumbled. That the woman he laughed at for dreaming too big had gone and built a life he could never touch. But when Graham opened the door, Jake's face said everything. Confusion. Then embarrassment. Then that slow, creeping realization that whatever he thought was about to happen wasn't. Graham later told me via email that the guy seemed lost, asked, "Does Emily still live here?" and then kind of stood there awkwardly when Graham said no, that a new tenant had been there for months. He just nodded and said, "Huh. Thought she might have come back." Then he walked away. I stared at the email for a long time. I didn't feel satisfaction right away. I thought I would. But instead, I just felt still. Like the wind had finally stopped howling. Like I didn't have to brace myself anymore. People kept thinking I disappeared. That I gave up. That I ghosted my own life. But the truth is, I was building something. Quietly. Carefully. Patiently. That includes the conversations I'd started with a woman named Krista, Jake's old client from a failed branding project. She'd reached out to me last fall, after a networking panel I hosted. Said she admired my work and asked if I remembered her. I did. I remembered how Jake had flaked on 2 strategy meetings with her company, blamed traffic, then got angry when I offered to help. Turns out she never forgot either. That coffee we shared last month in Copenhagen? It wasn't just about catching up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just say, the people Jake underestimated? We started finding each other. And while he was busy assuming I was folding laundry in some overpriced Airbnb in Spain, I was preparing something a little more permanent. He just didn't know it yet. I even left one breadcrumb. Just one. I posted a single photo on my new business profile, the one Jake didn't follow because he never bothered to learn what I really did. The caption was simple. Growth requires letting go of dead roots. Thriving now. Quietly. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't mention names. But I knew it would get back to him. And it did. A week later, I got an email from a burner account. No subject line. No signature. Just 4 words. You made your point. I didn't respond. Because I hadn't made it yet. His assistant sent me an email by mistake. I didn't delete it. It landed in my inbox on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, final edits for Q3 proposal. It wasn't meant for me. The sender was clearly trying to loop in someone else with the same first name. But there it was, sitting in my inbox, wide open, full of details I definitely wasn't supposed to see. Jake was consulting again. Or trying to. The client was a mid-sized design firm out of Milwaukee, and the thread revealed what I already suspected: he was bluffing his way through another project. The kind of gig he'd promised results on with nothing to back it up. But what caught my attention wasn't the project itself. It was who he claimed he was working with. In the middle of the email, there was a line that stopped me cold. Working closely with Emily Hartman on campaign analysis and global expansion strategy. Me. He was using my name. My reputation. Pretending we were still professionally connected, that I was somehow helping him land clients. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Not angry. Not shocked. Just curious. Because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. But first, I saved the email. Then I forwarded it to myself, plus a second account I only used for legal documentation. Just in case. I didn't respond. I didn't confront him. I didn't even send a cease and desist, not yet. Instead, I started listening more closely. Watching where his name popped up. Asking quiet questions through people I trusted. Like Krista, the woman who had coffee with me last month. Remember her? Jake's former client? Turns out she wasn't just networking. She was vetting me. Her company was preparing a list of contractors to blacklist for upcoming collaborations due to performance issues. Guess whose name was already on the maybe list? Jake. All she needed was verification. So I gave it to her. Casually. Over a second coffee, in a sunlit little spot near the harbor. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply told the truth. And truth, when served quietly, can be devastating. Meanwhile, I began gathering other threads. Not just about Jake, but about the mess he'd been leaving behind. Through some light digging, and a little help from a friend who worked in credit verification, I learned Jake had missed 3 rent payments on the old apartment. Not only that, but he'd listed me as a personal reference, again, on a lease renewal he never actually got approved for. He was trying to stay in the apartment I used to pay for, using my name to do it. And Brielle? Gone. Wiped from his socials. Mutuals said she moved out in January after a huge blowout that apparently ended with her smashing a coffee mug against the door and telling him to go live off his ex's success if he loves it so much. That part made me laugh out loud. But the cracks were forming. Jake was slipping. He still wore the mask, still posted occasionally with captions about resilience and bouncing back. Still tried to look composed. But the shine was wearing off, and people were starting to notice. One of his old friends, Matt, DM'd me on LinkedIn, of all places. Hey, weird question, did you and Jake work on any campaigns together after you moved abroad? I just replied, nope. Haven't spoken to him since the day I left. A minute later, Matt replied with, huh. He's been saying you two are still close. That you consult with him remotely. I thought it sounded weird. I didn't take the bait. I just replied. People say all kinds of things. That was all I needed to say. Because I wasn't done collecting. I went back through old folders, receipts, emails, agreements. I found the draft of our joint LLC paperwork from 3 years ago, the one I never signed because Jake kept changing the terms. Back then, he'd pitched a business idea, a boutique branding agency. Said we could run it together. I liked the idea, but something always felt off. He kept pushing for control, but wanted me to fund it. Eventually, I told him I wasn't ready. Now I was glad I hadn't signed. Because he had. Without me. He filed under the same name. Used similar branding. Except there was no agency. Just him. A website, half-built. Socials with maybe a dozen fake followers. It looked real, on the surface. But I could see the scaffolding underneath. Hollow. Shaky. Desperate. And it gave me an idea. Around this time, Jake must have sensed something. I don't know if it was instinct or just paranoia, but he started posting more cryptic things. One story read, "Some people just can't let go. But that says more about them than it does about me." Another, "You can try to erase me. But you can't delete relevance." It would have been funny if it wasn't so transparent. He still thought I was reacting. Still thought I was caught up in him. He had no idea how far ahead I'd already moved. That I wasn't just watching him unravel, I was mapping it. Quietly. Carefully. And I wasn't alone anymore. Krista introduced me to her colleague, Nina, a corporate compliance consultant who helped vet reputations during M&A deals. She was sharp, efficient, and had a memory like a steel trap. She remembered Jake too. Didn't he promise us a whole brand refresh and then ghost halfway through? She joined the growing list. Then there was Michael, a junior developer who worked under Jake for a few months during his last contracting stint. Michael had been ghosted too, unpaid invoice, no reply. He'd been too nervous to speak up until I contacted him through a mutual forum. All I had to do was ask, "Did he ever mention me while you worked with him?" Michael, "Yeah. He said you were still advising him. That you gave him the growth plan." I asked if he'd be willing to put that in writing. He said yes. Little by little, I was building a file. Not just rumors. Proof. A pattern. A history of manipulation, misrepresentation, and reputation theft. But I wasn't planning to go public. Not yet. Jake didn't deserve a dramatic showdown. He deserved silence. Followed by precision. Then came the moment I knew we'd reached the tipping point. I got an email from an HR director at a creative agency I've consulted for in the past. She wrote, "Hi Emily, we're reviewing an applicant who listed you as a former collaborator. Jake Renner. Do you mind confirming the nature of your professional relationship?" I read it 3 times. Then I picked up the phone. "Hi Rebecca," I said when she answered. "I'm so glad you reached out. Let me walk you through what's actually been happening." I laid it out calmly. Clearly. Just the facts. When we hung up, she thanked me. Then added, "We've had 2 other women reach out about this guy in the past year. Seems like there's a pattern." Yeah. There is. Later that day, I checked Jake's business profile, the one he hadn't updated in months. It was gone. Deleted. No post. No explanation. Just, gone. The same afternoon, I got a text. From an unknown number. "You win. You happy now?" I stared at it. Not angry. Not smug. Just steady. Because here's the truth. I didn't want to win. I wanted peace. But Jake made that impossible when he tried to use me to prop up his failures. He made that impossible when he told me I couldn't survive without him. And now? I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Without him. Beyond him. Above him. And soon, he'd feel what that looked like, not through headlines or hashtags. But through consequences. Real ones. Permanent ones. And not just professional. Because when someone builds their entire identity on borrowing the strength of the woman they tried to break, eventually, the debt comes due. And mine was about to be paid in full. He toasted his new venture with champagne. I didn't interrupt. The photo popped up on LinkedIn on a Friday morning. Jake, standing at a lectern in some co-working space, holding a glass of bubbly, the caption reading, "Excited to announce the official launch of Renner Global Strategies, a full-service brand consultancy. Thrilled to have already partnered with international leaders like Emily Hartman on cross-continental campaigns." He tagged me. The audacity almost made me laugh. Even now, after losing clients, deleting his site, and sending bitter texts, he was still using my name to legitimize himself. Still clinging to the idea that I was quietly behind him. But what he didn't know was that every single person in that room had already received an email from me 2 days earlier. No accusations. No drama. Just a brief, professional statement clarifying that I had no affiliation with Renner Global Strategies and had never authorized the use of my name, likeness, or credentials. Attached to that email was a neat, chronologically ordered PDF, screenshots of Jake's misrepresentations, unpaid invoices, statements from his former clients, and a copy of the cease and desist my attorney had drafted on my behalf. I sent it only to the people on his guest list, people I knew he was pitching. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't smear him online. I simply gave his own audience the facts before he opened his mouth. So when he stood there, glass raised, waiting for applause, he was met with silence. I wasn't there, but Krista was. She'd been invited under the guise of a potential investor. She texted me from the back row. "It's happening." No one smiling. Another text. "He looks nervous." And then? Someone just asked him point blank if you're actually involved. He's stammering. I set my phone down and took a slow sip of my coffee. I'd built my life on composure. On being the polite one. The accommodating one. The woman who made things easier for everyone else. But this time I'd made it easy for myself. No speeches. No scenes. Just truth, placed gently in the right hands at the right time. By noon, the fallout had begun. 3 of his prospective clients had already emailed me to thank me for the clarification and to say they were pulling their interest. 2 of them copied him on the message. Krista called me that afternoon, voice buzzing with adrenaline. He walked out mid-pitch, she said. Left the champagne on the podium. Someone said he looked like he was about to be sick. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just said, that's unfortunate. Because the truth is, my revenge wasn't about humiliating him in a room full of strangers. It was about cutting off the lifeline he'd been using to feed his image. It was about making sure no other client or colleague got burned the way I had. It was about removing my name, my credibility, from his crumbling facade. And it worked. Within a week, his LinkedIn vanished. His website redirected to an error page. The business email bounced back with a generic mailbox full notification. Then came the last piece, the one I'd been holding quietly in my back pocket. Remember that draft LLC he filed under our old business name? The one I never signed? I still owned the trademark for the name, purchased years ago for $100. He'd been using it illegally since day one. My attorney filed a simple infringement claim. No drama. No court appearance. Just a notice of violation and a demand to cease all operations under that name or face damages. It hit him the same week he lost his clients. Krista forwarded me a message she'd gotten from him. I don't know what Emily's telling people, but she's destroying my career. This is defamation. She didn't respond. Neither did I. Because it wasn't defamation. It was documentation. A month later, he sent me one last email. Short. Bitter. You win. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Because this was never about winning. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about dismantling the story he'd built about me, the one where I was small, dependent, destined to fail without him. And it was about replacing it with the truth. I survived not because of him. I thrived in spite of him. The day after his email, I stood on a stage in Berlin, speaking to a room of 200 marketing leaders about sustainable brand strategy. They applauded when I finished, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like exactly who I'd always been, finally visible. After the conference, I got a message from Graham, the tenant at my old apartment. He and his boyfriend had bumped into Jake again. He looked different, Graham wrote. Like he aged 10 years and 6 months. Said he was rebuilding. Asked if you were still abroad. We told him we didn't know. He just nodded and left. I closed the message and stared out the window of my hotel room. The Berlin skyline glowed gold in the late afternoon sun. I thought about the woman who once stood in a Chicago kitchen, being told she wouldn't last a day on her own. And then I thought about the woman standing here now, halfway across the world, speaking at conferences, building her own team, writing her own narrative. Jake wasn't part of it anymore. Not even as a villain. Just a footnote. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself, hair pinned back, conference badge still around my neck, and smiled. Not the brittle, practiced smile I used to wear at his side. A real one. In the quiet of that room, I whispered, "You said I'd never survive without you." And then, out loud, stronger. I didn't. I thrived. The next morning, before my flight, I posted a photo, me standing on stage, the audience blurred behind me, my hands mid-gesture. The caption read, "They thought they erased me. All they did was give me a clean page, and I wrote the ending myself. No hashtags. No names. Just that." By the time my plane touched down in Copenhagen, the post had more likes than anything I'd ever shared. Messages poured in from women I'd worked with, old colleagues, even strangers. Needed this today. Thank you for sharing. I left my own Jake last year. I'm scared, but this gives me hope. I sat there scrolling, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from something lighter. Something freer. Because my story wasn't about Jake anymore. It was about all the people who've been told they're too small, too fragile, too dependent, and who quietly, patiently, built lives bigger than anyone expected. That's the real revenge. Not the downfall. The freedom.